How's it going, everybody? We're here for another recording episode for Vector Accelerator, and I'm super excited to have someone that I admire, someone that I've got to know over the last few years, Bobby Land. And so, Bobby Land, so grateful that you spent the time here to share some personal experiences of what it's like to be a veteran in transition and then actually make that transition. So, Bobby, if you don't mind, just kind of telling us a little bit about you. I want to hear what was how did you get in the military? Like, what was the driving reason? Because I think it's different for veterans. It's funny when you hear their stories. So what was the driving reason to join? And then did you know you were going to be in as long as you did? And then what did you actually end up doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really do appreciate being on here. And it's kind of a funny story, I guess, going in, because I had no thoughts of joining the military when I did, and the multi-service might get a kick out of it. I actually got a call one day from a Marine recruiter, and I didn't know it at the time, but I happened to answer the phone. Not to date myself, but the phone was actually on the wall, and I walked by, picked it up, and he's like, "Yeah, I want to Bobby Land," and my dad's name is like junior, senior, junior. I'm like, yep, that's me. And he's like, I'm calling from the United States Marine Corps. This is Captain Cook. And I was like, that's fake. It's a prank call. And I clicked.
Captain Cook. That's classic.
Yeah, it just sounded very comical. Like, I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. I've heard this one. But
I'm like, yeah, this is Captain Morgan.
It's exactly like what it was. And fast forward, a bit of time, and then one day, a recruiter happened to be going around, my school, and it was like, we started kind of talking, and next thing you know, he's like, "Well, what are you going to do after high school?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know. I'm going to go to college." He's like, "Oh, cool. What are you going to do?" And I'm like, "I don't know. Something in the medical field, I was like, something that would pay off." And he's like, "Okay, how are you going to pay for that?" And I was like, I don't know. Like, I haven't thought about that. And he's like, "Well, let me tell you about this program we got." And have you ever heard of the Montgomery GI Bill? And then, next thing, one thing leads to another. And this is like my junior year in high school. And I'm signing up. Actually, I had to have my mom sign for me because I was too young.
Yeah.
My mom came in, and she was like, kind of came in. So it's my dad, my mom, who my parents divorced when I was really, really young. Matter of fact, I don't remember them ever actually being together. I lived with my mom half my life, my dad the other half, and she had custody, so she had to go sign. So she comes in, and it was just kind of on the heels of the Gulf War, the war to end all wars. And she's like, "I just don't want him to be in a tank," and blah blah blah. And I was like, "Cool." So I joined. I joined communications. Got in and realized like this wasn't for me, and I wanted something more. And this is after the fact, right? I was in. I was like, "Well, if I'm going to do this, I kind of like it. I think I might stay in for a bit." And then I reclassified, went into the infantry. Stayed in the infantry for a couple of years. Then, I was like, all right, well, what else is out there? So then I volunteered and went through selection to be part of the Special Forces Regiment, as a Green Beret. And went to selection, obviously got selected. And then, that was it. And, turning back, I started as a weapons sergeant and went in as a sergeant or an E5. And from there, I continued and made it to a command sergeant major, and then I did a 30-year career.
Wow. So 30-year career. Okay, here's that latter part of the question that I had for you is, how many times in that 30 years did you think about, is it time to finish this career and move on? Or was it wasn't even a thought until the very end? Like, what were those conversations like for you and with you and your family?
I think I had the normal one that everybody goes through around the 9-year mark of like, hey, am I going to get out, or am I going to stay in?
Yeah.
And if I'm going to go 10 years in one day, then I'm going for 20. And if not, then I'm getting out and I'm going to go on. And I was actually really close to getting out at that point. And then luck had it for me and just wound up staying in at that point. And then I had it again at 20.
Okay.
But then at this time, I was part of a unit that was of the base realignment, and we were supposed to be moving from North Carolina to Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And we were in Afghanistan. I was a team sergeant at this time. So this is around 2010. And I just started my team time, again, was part of a team in Afghanistan. And then they hit me up and they were like, well, hey, you only have, a year and a half, whatever the math was at that point, 18 years. You don't have enough retainability to PCS. So you're not going to be able to move unless you extend, reenlist, whatever, kind of go indefinite. And I was like, well, before that, I was going to have the perfect career. I was going to do my team sergeant time for, a couple of years. And when that time was over, I was going to hit 20. I was going to get out. And then when they told me that, hey, you'll have to leave the team early, I was like, well, I'm not doing that, And then I went, well, I'll just stay in a little longer. Let's go a little bit further. And then I jumped to 20. And then again, never really looked back after that point until it was kind of like a shock moment. Honestly, I never planned on it. I knew it would happen at some point, but I hadn't planned that far. It was just one day I got to the point where I was having to interview for positions. I was at a brigade level whenever I actually retired, and the next positions were like, Special Operations Command Central, or Korea, Europe, things like that. So for anybody who doesn't know, like the services will pick like one person to interview for the job, and you interview with the general who's going to be in charge, and he gets basically 4 names, 4 packets. He or she interviews them, and then they pick one of them. And I was at this point was going for Central. I interviewed, and it was with a Navy admiral. And then so he says something to me. He says like, "Hey, listen." He goes, "I've got 4 packets here. I've got 4 people." He goes, "Obviously, you're competent. We're not really concerned about that right now, or else I wouldn't have your packet in front of me." He goes, I think what our position is to find who's going to make the best team together to where we can go forward and lead." He goes, "I think what I need is somebody who's going to complement my strengths as weaknesses, where I am a little weaker, like, you'll come in and strengthen those up, and vice versa. We'll be a good complementary team. We'll be able to do the best mission we can." And I was like, fair enough. Sounds good. Like, let's go. And then, so he's like, "All right, well, I'll start. I'll tell you about me." And this guy starts talking, and he starts pretty much laying me out. Like, here's who I am. And he starts talking about me. And then, so, I came to a crossroads, and then he's like, "Okay, now tell me about you." And I'm like, after having opened up, I was like, man, I have a decision here to make. I've got, like, I can give you the right answer. I could tell you the truth, so, and I guess that goes into, like, I was just trying to be like authentic to who I was. And I was like, you know what, I'm just going to say who I am and let it be what it is, and let it flow how it's supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
So I basically started telling him about me, again, like who he described. And I tried to church it up. I tried to use like acronyms that I know, like from the Navy. Instead of saying Master Sergeant, I would say, I would either say like Senior Chief or something like that, to try to church it up a bit and say like, "Hey, I'm joint," like I've been around a bit. But at the end of it, we hung up the phone. I was like, I didn't get that job. Like, I knew it. And sure enough, he calls me back and he's like, "Hey, things, great interview. I know like a bunch of people who can use you right now, but I'm going to go with this other person." And I don't know if I was prepared for that. Like I had never not gotten the job
Mm.
before, you know. Um, like it was almost like, what do you mean? Like no, like well, I don't understand these words that you're talking about. Like no,
It's
like you know,
you're making a mistake, you know.
yeah. And I decided like, hey, you know, the universe is kind of telling me, you know, it might be time to go. And then off of that, I made the decision that, and it wasn't just that one thing. There was a couple other things were starting to line up. And I was like, you know what? I think it's time to get out. And I dropped my retirement packet. And then once I dropped my retirement packet and it was officially submitted, there was this like weight I felt got lifted. Like if you're on a long march and you drop your ruck and this, you feel kind of weightless and you're, wow, you know, you had that on you. Like hindsight, like I don't think I wanted the job. You know, I think I
Mm.
was, I think it was like I was really tired and I didn't realize it. It
Wow.
was something there for me to do. Like there was like, if you're telling me like to interview for this job, you know, and you're putting this, I have to say yes, because why else would you be asking me? You know, it wasn't a choice.
Mm.
It was like, we need somebody to do this, and I'm always like, I'll do it. You know, and after that, then it was more like, okay, now what am I gonna do? You know, then it's kind of like, I think it was a bit of a panic in a way,
Mhm. Mhm.
uh, not knowing what the next thing was going to be. And
Yeah.
I think I resigned. Like life at that point was going to be, all right, well, the excitement's over. Now what? I'm going to have to do some job that I don't want to do. I'm going to have to work for the government somewhere, someplace I don't want to live, do some job that I don't want to do, and just be part of that system of, you know, the has been back in my day. We used to do this and no authority and everything else. Just tell them why, you know, just be that disgruntled person. I didn't want to be that person. And I'm not trying to knock anybody who goes into government service at all, but that's the
Sure.
way I
Right.
viewed it. That was my view of the way things, you know, were, and I would have done it, you know,
Yeah.
and I was
Yeah.
prepared to do that because, you know, the alternate of that is now if I need to provide for my family and whatever that is, that's what I'm going to do. So, you know, I didn't necessarily like it, but I'm going to do it. Um,
As yeah, as you started like telling me about the realization that it might be over, you know, this career and it's just time to move forward, and the sense of I'm not sure what I should do, but I think I know what's expected of me, almost like this it's the government role or go into government sort of as the next natural progression of things. You know, it makes sense. So that's what everybody else does. Might as well do that too. I think
yeah.
that's something that's totally I can relate to, because I had an assumption. I thought I had to do the same thing. And it was going to be a government agency of some sort, maybe 3 letters. I don't know, but it just kind of made sense. And it's okay to disappear in the basement for a while, you know, and just do another job in a desk. Um, you had a unique experience in that you went through this process that a lot of veterans will go through in Vector Accelerator. It's these questions of digging into the what if. Like, what if? Okay, that's one scenario, like you said. And anybody that goes into a government job, if that's what you want to do, great. Like, if that's for you, we need you to go do that. But the
Mhm.
questions that are inside Vector, and you went through the Honor Foundation, which is where these questions came from. These questions sort of help you think, what if? What if I don't go that way? What else is there for me? You went through that process, and so I'm really curious to know, because a lot of veterans don't realize that these questions are in front of you, that they're going to come when you go to the Honor Foundation. Just like some people enroll in Vector and they're not sure that these questions are coming their way. What was it like for you to kind of think, okay, I'm going
Yeah.
to go to this transition process and it's going to help me get a job and I'll move on to something, but then all of a sudden realize, wait a minute, what am I looking at here with these questions? Like, what were those feelings like for you? Was it okay? Was it fine? You know, where were you feeling?
Well, I remember right before that, you know, I was going down the full transition path, you know, with like the military services and starting to take the different classes and
Mhm.
whatnot, just the standard ones that are out there for you. And I think when it really hit me is my wife. So I'm taking her around one day. I tell the story at the CCF event this year. Um, I'm in there tinkering around in my garage, and then my wife comes in, and she's like bawling, like crying, and I'm like almost in shock, like, oh, like what happened? Like, this is bad. This is really, really bad. And then she comes up, and then she's like, I said, what's wrong? She goes, you're going to be one of them. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she's like, you're going to be one of those. I could see it on you. And I can't get it out. Like, I don't get it. Like, I'm not following you.
Right.
She literally thought that I was going to be one of those who got out. And then, in a year or two, like I'm, committing suicide and I'm,
Wow.
taking myself. Yeah. I didn't feel that way. It never even crossed my mind, but whatever it was, I was putting out there. Like, and
That
I
some
think,
sort of energy that she was picking up on?
almost that
Wow.
maybe is that life is over, that like, hey, this is what the rest of my life is going to be, that nah,
My goodness.
just trudging, through,
Yeah.
but hey,
Yeah.
gonna do it. And yeah, you're all wet and soaked down, but you're just gonna keep pushing. And it's not exciting by any means. Like, well, but let's get it
Yeah.
done. And then I, from there, I'll try to, reassure her, like, hey, it's gonna be fine. Yeah, whatever. And then I found THF, and started that program. And then she had
Mm.
always told me, like, you're going to be fine. You've done this. You were a CSM. You've talked to ambassadors and blah 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 blah. And I'm like, you don't understand. Like, I don't have much education. I don't have any experience. This is only like probably like the second job I've ever had. It was a bagger at a grocery store, and then it was this. You know, and I don't really have anything to offer anybody. And that's where I
Wow.
was at. Um, so when it goes back into, like, all you have is like the same thing you've been doing. And then when I went through THF, they started asking me those questions, the things that you've never asked, like, well, I started learning about myself, like who I was, what drives me, the things like you think but you really don't know. Nobody's ever actually labeled them before. No one's ever actually like asked you, like, well, hey, what are the five things you want from a job? Love who you work with, live where you want to live, make decent money, work, good, decent hours, all those things. Like, I've
Right.
never heard any of that framed before. Um, and then, you start talking, and then it was probably about 2 weeks into that process. And I started thinking, like, like, wow, like there's other opportunities out there outside of, you know, DC, Tampa, and Fort Bragg. Like,
Right.
there's a lot of work out there. Like, maybe we can live where we want to live. And then optimism started coming in, and then so I started to, like, learn who I was, and framing that out, and 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 then I got an opportunity through the Honor Foundation, and met the company I'm currently with. And I started a program, and yeah, I started doing those things. But something that really stuck out is when I was going through the THF, my coach asked me, he's like, hey, what about your current job do you really enjoy doing? One of the first
Okay.
things we ever talked about.
Hmm.
And I had moved so I was a battalion CSM. I was in Northeast Syria in 2019, you know, fighting with the Kurds against ISIS, making these pushes. And then after I came off of that, I got, promoted. And next thing you know, I'm on like a brigade level, and I'm on, at that time, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And I was the commandant of the non-commissioned officer academy. Completely different environment,
Right.
180. Like, at that time, like, new vocabulary, new, mission, everything else. And I was more comfortable on the other side of that, you know.
Mm.
And I was thinking, like, well, not much, like, there's not really, not too much I like. And I was kind of unfair to like, he's asking me, I was like, well, okay, here's what I like. Let me tell you, here's something I like. And, I blew it off and I was like, if you really want to know, he goes, I said, I like those times where I might be in my office doing something. I hear a little rap on the door and somebody pokes their head around the corner and it's like one of my, one of the leaders in the unit and they stick their head in. They're like, hey, CSM, you got a second? Let me run something by you. Or, hey, can I get your opinion on this? The next thing, yeah, come on, button up whatever I'm doing. And then like, yeah, sit down, like let's talk. And then next thing you know, like we're at the whiteboard because they have a problem and then we're writing things out and it could be career advice. It could be a problem at that point. It could be something with a student. It could be, just some sort of like issue they're trying to work through or just see the reassurance that they're making a good decision.
Mm-hmm.
That I got into that. Like we'd drawing things out, arrows, boxes, lines, underlining,
Nice.
But, hey, you know what else? We should go talk to so-and-so because they're looking for something like this and we can join together and, really building this out. And then I guess you take that and then you fast forward now that I'm in a new role with the shows, and just kind of like learning the ropes. And I got an opportunity that got brought to me, and it was like, my boss was like, hey, at this point, it was like, hey, what do you know about homeowners insurance? And I was like, I pay homeowners insurance. And
I have it.
Yeah, yeah.
Expensive. There's premiums, a deductible.
Yeah, I was working like in the business development sort of space,
Right.
And he's like, "Well, I got an opportunity for you," and he says, he goes like, "We're going to partner with this other company, and work for a mortgage company," and he said, "We're going to start building this product out to offer homeowners insurance to try to help people. The market's really rough in this neighborhood, so we want to get with somebody so we can help those in need."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Okay, that sounds good." And he goes like, "And you and my partner," he's like, "You guys are going to lead the implementation team." I was like, "Yeah, that's great. Like, not a problem." And inside I'm like, "Oh gosh, like
Yeah.
I hope I do a good job." And then it was, all right, well, who do we need to talk to? I was like, "Here's your point of contact. Go over there, go talk to these people." And I was like, "All right," and when I say I, it's me and my partner. Hey, how's it going? Bobby Lynn, I'm from over here. Who are you? And then we start building this thing out. And I was like, all right, well, what do we need? And we start, putting things down. Going over to our side of the company is like, like start looking for resources. And like, oh, hey, we need some marketing folks. Like you come with me. Like we need somebody from customer service, like come over here. We need a training department. And we started like building this kind of coalition. I'm starting to I'm excited about going to work. And I had this kind of almost like embarrassing moment where I was like, why are you excited about this? I mean, it's implementing homeowners insurance. Like it's not really anything, all of that. Like
it's not too sexy, is it? Yeah.
But my friends don't see me kind of a thing. And
yeah, I just got a question for you, man. Well, it's actually like a phrase that we've said inside the Honor Foundation. I've had these conversations with Vector participants. We put so much emphasis on what we do, and so like in the military, I mean, you were, quote, a door kicker, right? Like that's what you did, and you probably really enjoyed not only the training component but the actual mission and all of that. But then when you think about what goes behind the process of kicking the door, there's a lot of work, the workups, the training, everything, the production of the deployment to allow you to kick that door, right? So there's all this other stuff to do, maybe a tiny fraction of time, right? The actual door kicking is a tiny fraction of time compared to everything that you do to build up to do that.
yeah.
And those things, the management, the budgets, the the logistics, the personal movement of folks across the globe for that deployment to go do that thing. There's a lot involved, and sometimes we kind of overlook that, and we just kind of look at the really cool parts, but not even realizing in all that hard work, there's some things that you're just naturally good at. And it sounds like, you correlated to, as a senior person in the military, you probably had tons of people, like you said, knocking on your door. Hey, can I run something by you? Hey, what do you think about this? And you got some juice out of like solving a problem. And so this problem solving, visionary of some sort, like looking futuristic, kind of seeing what they're saying and seeing how it could play out. It sounds like that's what happened in where you're at when this company is. Somebody kind of high up in the company realized some capability that you had, didn't know if you'd find the solutions, but took a chance and said, hey, Bobby, what do you think? Like, here's an idea, go figure it out. And it sounds like you kind of started putting pieces together. It's that problem solving, futuristic, visionary, whiteboard kind of ideation piece. Is that kind of sound like very similar? I mean, does that sound right?
That's exactly it. So basically, instead of like, here's a spot on the map, we really don't know anything about it, but we're going to put your team in here and you're going to go figure it out. And then you're going to, it's the exact same thing, except for, we always call it like, you got to go meet the G chief and you got to go get in the G base. Like, it's now another company with a point of contact. And then you're going to figure out like, all right, well, what do we need to do? What do we need to get done? What's our mission? And then you're going to go back and you're going to start, gathering your resources and, planning this thing out. And wearing all those multiple hats, like you might not be a marketing person, but I know somebody who is. Like, hey, come on, like let's build a team. I didn't know anything about cryptology. I wasn't like an expert at that, but I know Joe does. Like, hey, let's go. Like, come on, we need you. Like, and then leaning on folks to like, and they're experts in their field, and like, all right, well, how do they play in? How do they affect things? What is like, what's the second, third order effects of everything we do?
Right.
Start thinking ahead, start, kind of anticipating problems. What are our risks? How are we going to mitigate them? All that still exists. And one of the really funny things that I saw was like, when you're starting to talk risk and you're talking with legal and things like you're still dealing with a lawyer. It doesn't dropping a bomb, having a bomb dropped and trying to get something through like compliance and legal. It's very, very similar. We got to protect the old man, or or the mission, or whatever it may be, or we got to protect the company. And you're like, just how do we get to yes? Like,
right.
This is my plan. Like, well, we can't do that. Cool. All right. What if we do this? Like, how do we get like, okay, yeah, we could do that. All right, let's keep going. Let's push, and all that drive. And it started firing up all that stuff you had done for years, multiple times, like, going, whether it doesn't matter if you're going on a training mission or if you're going into combat somewhere, it was the same thing. And, and like you said, like, you plan for days, weeks, months for 20 minutes time on target.
Right.
Yeah. And then you hit the target, and then you're like, okay, what's next? And you start what comes after the target. And that's that long range, like, all right, hey, we launched the product. Now what do we do with it? And all that it is what starts building and making it grow. I found that really exciting.
That's really cool. And I think it's the study of, it's positive psychology, and it's the sense of when you find the things that you really love to do, it's and it's not about hobbies. It's like work, right? And types of work, environments of work, where you almost get in this state of flow, and you feel fulfilled at the end. And it's exercising those talents that you naturally have. I think where a lot of veterans find, let's call it you're at a peak, but some veterans find themselves in a valley in their organization. They're not exercising those talents. It's like, Bobby, if I said, hey man, we don't need you to do any of that. We just need you to sit in this cubicle and just move this paper pile from A to B. That's it. Just type that stuff in, go down the rows, spreadsheets, and just, that's what we need you to do. you'd probably lose your mind. Like you go crazy if that's, you're like, this is it, it's probably making people cringe, but also there's veterans that would probably love that. So, but knowing who you are, Bobby, like, I think you'd lose your mind. And so it's great that you were able to find an environment where you got to exercise your talents, but also the people around you were willing to take a risk because they saw something in you. And so I guess it's like a culture question that I feel is coming next, right? That I want to throw your way. How did you know you were in the right culture, that something good was going to happen? It might not have happened right away, because I think you were in the company for a while. You're kind of feeling out the environment, feeling out who's who in the zoo. But then at a certain point, there's a tipping point when you had this epiphany, a realization that, no, this is good. What was that like for you to kind of, first of all, be on the side of, is it going to happen? Will I be able to use my talents and strengths, or did I make the right choice? And then when the light bulb hit, like, yes, this is it. I get to do this. What was that like for you?
I started really kind of figuring out like what I didn't want to do and what I was not going to, settle for, be comfortable with. Because like you said, I would run across people who was like, yeah, I put all of the figures into the spreadsheet and then I upload it and then I upload it over here. And as I'm talking with them, I'm in my head, I'm thinking like, that's every day, huh? Like, that's horrible. But, and you bring up a really good point. For that person, they liked that. They loved it. They liked their job and what they needed. Whereas I tend to gravitate to where my job is what kind of fulfills me. That person may not be fulfilled by that job. That job might be what they do every day to, earn their living, provide for their family, this and that. But maybe they teach Little League in the evenings, and that's where their passion is, and that's where they drive, and they get their fulfillment and things from. Like, so, everybody's different.
Very true.
So like, who knows? Or maybe they like spreadsheets, who knows? But, I think like being authentic to who you are, I knew that the type of environment I needed to be in, like I knew I couldn't work for somebody. It's like, hey, you running everything through me. If you have any questions, you come to me. I'll give you your next step, and then you go and do what you're told. Like, I'm not comfortable in that space, and I figured that out.
Right.
I'm used to being more exploratory. Like, hey, if there's a problem that I see, or if there is a problem, I'm going to go and find out what's going on. I'm going to dig in, and I'm going to find out like what's going on, and I'm going to bring that back to you for a decision point, and I'm going to provide options. I'm like, all right, listen, here's the problem. Here's the way I see it. We have, option A, pros and cons, option B, pros and cons, or C, whatever it may be. And then, hey, here's the risk if we do this. Here's the risk if we do that. Here's here's what we get out of this. Here's what we get out of that. And then, dig more into B. Got it. All right, let's go. And then go back out and then start fighting, and then come back for a decision like, yes, I like that. Now run with it, go. And then I implement or do whatever it is. Like, that's the environment I needed. Like, I needed some freedom, I guess. That just give me my left and rights. I'll stay within those. If I need to go out of those, I'll come to you and say like, listen, this is the parameter. I need to go see what's up over here. I'm like, yep, sounds good. Go. I'm like, no. Like, this is where you need to be. Like, okay, understood, got it. And then I'll go back out. I need some freedom and creativity. And I learned that.
I think that's an important thing and so there's two, like, I'm going to oversimplify this, but let's just say there's two groups of veterans that are listening to this right now. There's some that are active duty, preparing to get out, preparing to transition. And so they could actually take Vector Accelerator to kind of work through some of those questions, work with other people to figure out what their natural strengths are and talents are, identify what those are, and then weave that into maybe how they do interviews, right? So when they talk to a company, and let's just say, Bobby, you're active duty, you've done all this deep dive work. You haven't done this experience in carrying, where you're at in your current company, but like you go through Vector, you go through these questions, you figure out, man, I love to strategize. I love to solve problems. I like autonomy as well, to, freedom of movement, but I will be a really good communicator and make sure that I'm checking in with those to my left and right. So I'll move within an organization that makes sense and not just go off on my own, right? But I need some movement and ability to discover solutions, to find ways to move forward. That is one scenario. But then there's the other scenario, and it sounds like maybe you kind of had an idea of that stuff, but in the organization you found that in the work. Like you might not have maybe led with that. I think it was maybe the environment around you created that and allowed you to realize, man, I can exercise myself here, and this other part of the company I just couldn't. So I know I don't want to do that job. It's not for me. This other one is. I want to move in that space. And so I think sometimes there might be veterans that have already transitioned. They're currently in a company. And so maybe it's just a matter of going through Vector, figure out what your talents are, figure out what you love to do, and look for opportunities to flex on those strengths within your current organization. We don't necessarily want people to jump ship and go find another company. Like sometimes it's right around you. It's right in front of you. You just need to know your talent, know your value, and then be able to contribute. I think that's really what I'm hearing as I listen to you. That could be really powerful for somebody hearing your story, seeing how you thrive. I mean, it's insurance, dude. It's homeowners insurance. It's not a sexy thing. Granted, we need it, but it's much less about the thing, and it's more about how you're doing it. I think that's safe to say, right?
100%. Like what the industry is and what the product may be, it's kind of irrelevant. It could be missile technology. It could be like Tupperware. It doesn't matter. It's all of that. Like how we're going to do this.
Yeah.
And I think that, like I said it earlier, is being authentic to. I think if I'm very careful for this, and I've told people this, it's always easy to say when you're on the backside and you're like, well, you have a job. I don't have a job yet, so take that with a grain of salt, right? But finding out like who you are and then letting the folks know who you are, I think is just important, because
there you go. Yeah.
If you're like guarded because all you're concerned about is getting the job and you're trying to say the right answers, and if I feel like I'm getting very canned answers and not finding out who's this person on the other side of this, of this interview, I want to know who drives you. And guess what? Like, if you say who you are, and this is me, and this is what I need, and they don't bite, like what happened to me with that job I told you about,
right?
That's fine. Like they're not looking for you, and guess what? You're not looking for them.
Right.
I guess going back, like of course I found out like who did this guy pick, and I find out like we were different people. They were looking for someone else, and that is fine. That's not to say like that person's like better than me, I'm better than them, sour grapes, whatever. Like what they needed was not who I was. And you know what? I probably didn't need to be over there either. It's just
Can you imagine? Yeah, can you imagine if they said, no, let's go ahead and move forward with Bobby? And to your point, they didn't, you're coming in with these strengths and things that you love to do, and you're not able to exercise it because that's not what they were looking for, right? I mean, it's a fascinating to think about, right?
Yeah, and the company, and then back then, like you're talking about theater is going to pay for it, but now the company's going to pay for it, and whoever like you might have subordinates or not, like it's just not going to be a good fit for you. I think it's super important, and I think, and this is all stuff that's learned, right? I think coming up, going out through the ranks and things like that, if somebody would have asked me, like, who do you see, or what is your idea of a leader? I would have probably pointed out somebody else, like who's the person that like, oh, if you like think about what a leader is, I was always like, oh man, it's somebody who you see and you're like, hey, like that person over there is probably not yourself. We've done a million like psychological evaluations. We do those personality tests and things like that. For me personally, like I always was on the fringes of those things. Like, hey, like here's a center. I was always on the outside, and for a while, even when I was in, like I would say earlier on, if I wasn't like in the middle of a group with everybody else, I was like, oh man, like
What's wrong with me?
yeah, exactly. And you know what? After a while, I got comfortable. I was like, I'm not that person. And you know what? It's fine. And I had my own way. I became comfortable with my leadership styles and abilities, and and you don't have to be somebody else. Like you be comfortable who you are. I learned that a while back. Like it's good. We don't need
That's
everybody to
definitely
be robots. We need people to think. We need everybody to utilize their talents.
That's definitely a theme. I mean, you've said it so many times, and I heard it just now with authentic you. What is that? What are you? And sometimes we make compromises, but there's a certain point when you need to hold true to yourself, right? And you don't want to portray to be somebody that you're not. Be
To
in the
get
middle, right?
right.
To get a job, right? You are who you are, and if you fake it and you get the job, might be pretty excruciating when you get that job and you actually start doing the day to day, because it's not really authentic. But if you
Yeah.
show yourself to be true and you're doing these job interviews and you're sharing, hey, I love, autonomy. I love structure. Whatever it is you say in your language, if it's authentic, and the job lines up, it's probably going to work better, as opposed to saying what you think other people want you to say to get the job just
Mm-hmm.
because you want the paycheck. I mean, my goodness, you're giving up so much by, it's like not even settling. It's not good. I mean, that's kind of, I think that's kind of what we're hitting at.
Right? Are you going to perform well, or are you just going to be in there like because you're going to be potentially miserable outside of your comfort zone, if you will? Like, I'm very comfortable outside comfort zones, but like, you know what I mean? Like, are you being able to
Yeah.
stretch limits, or are you just going to be stifled in there? And are you going to grow? Like, granted,
Yeah.
okay, cool, you got the job, and I hope you like it, because then possibly that's going to come out in your performance and you're in, year after year, and then pretty soon you're stagnated because you're not able to use your talents. Like, but maybe it was the next company, or maybe you just go straight into it, but it's the one that's in there. Like, you're going to probably flourish, and you're going to grow,
Yeah.
and you're going to sell, and you're going to, kind of pump all those things up. Like, if you're going to do something, I think for the most people that are listening to this, like, they're the type of people, like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. You know what I mean? And to
Mm-hmm.
be able to have that opportunity to build and advance, that's what people are, used to and want. And it's better for everybody. Like, you're in a corporate environment now. Like, if you're doing
Yeah.
well, you're doing well.
One of the big uphill battles we have with helping veterans realize that they need to do this sort of deep work. You don't know what you don't know. I think, a lot of veterans, they're looking for that checklist, and they pass it from one veteran to another, saying, hey, use this checklist to help you go through all your medical records and get everything ready. Talk to these nonprofits because they're going to help you get, set up for interviews and whatever the checklist may be. And then you have this thing that we're talking about, which is doing some deep work to figure out what makes you tick, what makes you feel alive in your work, versus sort of just mediocre, just kind of doing the mundane thing just to get by. Like, that's not what we're about. That's not what I want any veteran to do. And that's not definitely what you want any veteran to settle for. So how do we spread that message, I guess, like, and how do we help the veterans understand, like, look, this is something important, and don't skip this piece. And that's the challenge, Bobby. I think, if you think about how many veterans that you went through with Honor Foundation, there were some that were doing this deep work, or these questions. We hope they were doing it, and they might not have gotten the lesson out of it. They might have just kind of went through the motions of answering the questions and trying to rush through. Sounds like you didn't rush through. You maybe contemplated on these things. You talked about it with your coach. You talked about, you mentioned earlier, you just bounce things off of him to get some feedback. I think that's one of the pieces that we're trying to figure out here is how do we help veterans slow down and do the deep work? Yeah.
And I don't want to necessarily say like, hey, I figured it out and I got it. I kind of fell into it. The work was happening along the way that I didn't even realize I was doing. Right. I was just like, even when I joined THF, it's like, hey, there's this THF thing. My buddy told me about it. And I was like, well, what is it? And he's like, I don't know, but I heard it's really good.
You got to go. Yeah.
Just like any other school that you went to, like if I was going through like jump master school and learn how to, do check JMPI on a jumper and they offer a study hall and you don't go and you fail. So I was like, I have to go because if I fail because I didn't take advantage of this, like I can't live with that. So I was like, here's a program. Like, well, I guess I'll better do it because what if I don't, And then that's where, I started learning about things. I think that a lot of that was I kind of realized as I went through. Some of it was already may have been known, but it just wasn't really shaped and outlined like that.
Yeah.
And hopefully this is just an opportunity that if someone else is in the same boat, if I'm able to help them come to that realization, sooner than great. I think that's, what we're here for.
Yeah, absolutely. This
someone else's mistakes, right? Not your own.
Yeah, no, this conversation is important for that. I think that's why we need to have more of these conversations from folks that we interviewed another gentleman, veteran, who didn't do this deep work and they landed in a role and they found themselves not so happy. They're just kind of just going through the motions. And for a while, they didn't even realize something was wrong. They just knew that, I guess this is it. They just thought that was it. Luckily, then they came across Vector, started doing the questions and deep work and realized I can do better,
Yeah.
So they made a shift.
What are your needs? And they could be, financial, emotional, like what do you need as a person? And then maybe it's not the job. Maybe the job is just like that person I talked about earlier. Like maybe you just need something to do to get by, to get some money because like you restore old cars on the side, and that's like where your passion is. But you don't necessarily want to turn it into your livelihood. So, but that's where you find your calling or your fill. And you just need a job. Like, that's all right too. Whatever
Absolutely.
you just want, you're done. You're just like, I know by my finances, I need to make this much money. The whole joke about being the Walmart greeter, like, hey, I just need a little bit of money because I'm going to be fishing this afternoon or I'm going to go hunting this weekend. Who knows? What do you need as a person?
Absolutely. Yeah. You bring up a really good point because I don't think, we expect everybody that does this deep work to find a job that's absolutely 100% fills every bucket for you, right? Sometimes you have to make a sacrifice, but it's much different when you're aware of what you're sort of giving up.
Yes.
I think to your point, let's just say, you know what? I need to earn money right now. I'm willing to push myself through this job, but I know myself well enough. I need an outlet. I need a way to sort of give back. Maybe it's a thing of service. Maybe it's a thing of team-oriented work where you can serve in a nonprofit and fulfill that on the side, right, on the part-time, or in organizations in your community. There's ways to fill that bucket, and I think that's kind of, you bring up a really good point, Bobby. Like, everybody is so different and unique, and I think where Vector comes in is if you do this work, you're now making a better decision for yourself, and it's intentional versus just kind of stumbling along, hoping to kind of get what you think you need, not realize that you're missing out on opportunities of joy, of purpose, and you're just kind of settling. If you're going to make a sacrifice, you want to be intentional with it. And that's really the power of the type of work that you've done at the Honor Foundation and what we hope veterans do with Vector Accelerator. So good stuff, man.
Yeah, I trust in that process of like, hey, I don't really understand it, but you're saying this is what you should be doing, just like anything else you've done.
Yeah.
Like, I know my hand's supposed to go here and then chase across here. And then, like going through, I don't know what I'm doing yet, but you're telling me to do this and that's going to help me like come across, do this and excel and help you at the end. And, and at the end, like you're passing
you're moving.
You know, I think that was a little, I had to like kind of reach on those when they were like, hey, you're going to go do these cups of coffee. And I was like,
okay.
Like, all right, like you're just going to go and you're going to talk to people. And I was like, it's not really my strong suit, but like, I'm going to, you're saying to do it. I'm going to do it, trust the process, go through. And then hindsight, you're like, man, that's how you really kind of start figuring out what you're doing. I started, I think when I really started figuring it all out, like I was like, oh, I'm going to be a leadership consultant. That's what I'm going to do. Executive leadership consultant. Because, I was like, I was up there. Like, and I'm going to come out and be like, and as I started, it's kind of a joke about myself, I was like, I'm going to do this. And, how's that going to sound? And you should hire me to come consult your Fortune 500 company and learn about leadership. And like, okay, cool. He's like, how much have you done? I was like, well, I haven't really consulted anybody yet, but you know what? I'm really good and you should pay me a lot of money. It was like, I just didn't, I threw the cups of coffee, figuring things out, talking to one person, you talk to the next person and all those things start coming out. And then my path started shifting, and that's fine. That's part of that process and journey. Is figuring those things out and getting those out of the way. What if I just went all in on that? Like, yes, I'm going to go in and then like knock, like, hey, and have that conversation we just had. Like, what would that have been like? And not to mention you're not getting paid, when your family needs to go buy some groceries, get all those things knocked out and out of the way. And I'm not saying like I did it right and perfect because I did not. I don't think there's a such thing, but by kind of going through the motions and there was other industries that I looked at where I got a lot of no-shows, and with that one I was like, well, man, like I know this probably isn't for me. If I'm getting this many no-shows to this area, like I'm gonna start looking what else is out there, and you start this discovery process, and then tell me about 2 people that you think I should talk to. And then you start doing those branches and you start learning about all those things. That's where you start coming in and figuring it out. Don't be afraid of that exploratory type of environment.
Yeah, the cups of coffee piece, it's a big part of Vector. Because you can answer these questions and journal all you want by yourself. It's not going to really help unless you go into that space of what may feel uncomfortable, like how you described it. It was for me as well, just having those first cups of coffee. And it's taking a leap of faith, trusting the process, doing it. And then in doing that work, clarity, you start figuring out, maybe I don't want to do consulting. Maybe I want to lean on this side. I want to be inside a company and sort of build within. I think what you're doing is you're creating opportunity from within the business after given that ability. It's I mentioned it on another podcast. There's entrepreneurialism and there's intrapreneurialism, and so this is inside a company that exists, and so now you're kind of creating business opportunities, which is really neat. And you found that that's something you're actually pretty good at too. Is what it sounds like. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Bobby, we got a little bit of time, so I want to ask you what's your top piece of advice for anybody that's going to come across this, and what do you want to tell to the veteran audience?
I would say, be comfortable being uncomfortable. Said it time and time again, like learn who you are really, and don't try to be who you think you should be. Like, who are you?
Mm,
What makes you you? There's a lot of value in that. Um, I think that if the more authentic you are, the more you know what you need, what your strengths are, and your valleys, like your peaks and valleys. Learn that stuff, and let's be aware,
mm,
and then look for opportunities that fit, within that. I think that you're going to be happier. Your company, whoever you are, is going to be happier. Your family's probably going to be happier for you. Like, whether you did 4 years or 30 years, what is this next piece of your life going to look like? Um,
yeah.
and you want to make the most of it. You don't want to be miserable. You don't want to be looking back and like, hey, man, I should have this, I should have that.
Hmm.
Find and be happy. Like, you deserve to be happy. Like, go find something you really want to do. Um, I think that's going to be, the best thing for you. And then yeah, I think, remember too, like for me specifically, and the more people I talk to, it seems to be more, is that first year, it's rough. Like,
Mm,
even when things are lined up, it's rough. It's different. Like, you could be on top of the world 1 second and in the pits the next, and nothing changed. It just is what it is. Like, just know going forward, if that's happening to you, just keep going, keep getting through it. A lot of people do it, so don't think like, oh man, what's wrong? Like, nothing. Just keep. Sorry, my mouth starts to come out a little bit, but like, just keep moving forward. um, and hopefully, maybe it doesn't, and even better. But
yeah.
know that you're not alone. Know that you're not like, man, these other people who did everything right and all worked out. And it's not for me. It's an illusion. Like, there's problems, there's issues, like there's strife, and you just keep doing what you're doing, keep moving forward, another foot in front of the other, and you're going to be fine. It all will settle out.
Yeah.
So, I
That's
just, yeah.
I was going to say that's a story that's played out many times for most veterans. It's a lot. You feel the pressure in that first year. It might not be perfect where you find that perfect role and perfect opportunity, perfect boss, all those things. Um, but to your point, keep moving forward. And I would add this network that you've built of, through the 50 cups of coffee, maybe you've identified a few folks where the voices are really powerful. And we call it board of directors inside Vector Accelerator. You call it what you like, but maybe it's just a voice of reason, a voice that you can kind of vent towards when you do find yourself in a lull in that first year. Um, Regardless, keep moving forward because it's worth it. The alternative is settling. The alternative is just kind of just doing mediocre work. But the reality is, I don't think many people are chasing mediocrity. They're kind of like they want significant work. They want to feel valued. They want to feel like they belong, and that the company or organization. Maybe you don't want to go to work. Maybe you want to go work in nonprofit, in that kind of work environment, or you want to go to academia. Whatever it is, you want to find an organization where you feel valued and welcomed as well. So, good advice, Bobby.
Yeah.
Appreciate hanging out with you, man. Um, we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up, but if definitely shared some deep stuff. So thank you for going deep early on with that personal story of difficulty and challenge and potentially being a statistic. Oh my goodness, to finding your way to move forward. And it sounds like you're doing some incredible things. And from my vantage point where I'm at, you are doing incredible things. So super grateful to observe all that. Bobby, how can people reach out to you and ask you questions about, maybe they want to go a little bit deeper in your story to kind of see, because maybe it pertained to them, like what happened to you is like, oh, that's what I'm feeling too. I want to ask Bobby something. How can people get a hold of you?
Yeah. You can get me on LinkedIn. I'm Bobby Land on there. Feel free to, my pictures on there. reach out to me there. Let me know that you're from here, so that there's a way of connecting, and knowing kind of a bona fides. And I'm available. Yeah, I love talking to people, and helping where I can, and find those. Very good point is find those people who you can reach out to. Like, you're not going to relate with everybody. There's people out there who you'll gravitate. It's like, oh, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, and then seek those people out. So if I can be that to someone else, I'm all about it. So yeah, definitely reach out on LinkedIn, let me know, and we'll talk.
There you go. So you got me, you got Bobby. That's 2 cups of coffee right there. I mean, easy, right? You just got to do 48 more. So
yeah.
all right. Hey, thanks so much, Bobby. Appreciate you.